We are tonight looking at a design services agreement with Keller Associates out of Meridian, Idaho, as the next step in the 3rd Street Bridge project. If you'll recall, about 2 months ago, we had a presentation here at the council about the project and how it would advance in terms of a selection of a design consultant. We did a request for qualifications process back in September, received those statements of qualifications in October, made a selection in October, early November, and have been negotiating a scope of services since that time. And so it's before you this evening, as was presented to the Public Works Finance Committee last week, is the task order under our general services contract with Keller to perform the design and construction management services for the bridge itself. And I know there have been some questions out there about the scope overall of what's within this task order and whether or not it includes anything else within the corridor. This particular contract is specific to the bridge itself. It includes an assessment of the types of bridges that are available to us for this particular situation. We've talked over the course of time about what kind of bridge might work here. And one of the front runners, if you will, would be a precast concrete arch structure that should be made in a manufacturing plant and then shipped in by truck and then assembled here, similar to what was done by the North Latah County Highway District in Viola a couple of years ago, and of the type that is being constructed as part of the Logos school project this late summer. So that's one of the possibilities. There are other types, whether it's a steel girder bridge, a concrete girder bridge, it could be an aluminum arch. There's different styles. And so far we've done the cost estimating that's resulted in the budget that we have based upon the precast concrete arch. So we'll be looking at that. But some of the things we'll be looking at in that assessment are, what's most cost effective, which type of bridge has the least impact on the creek channel, has the least impact on the water levels within the creek when it comes to hydraulic capacity, which one fits best with the vertical elevation components as it relates to tying into the surrounding neighborhood, street, and sidewalk system. So that'll all be part of that initial step, if you will, within this task order, is assessing which bridges are out there that might work, and then with those kind of considerations, which is the best to pursue in the design. Excuse me. As part of that, there will also be the hydraulic analysis. We're looking at how much water is in the creek during the storm events, what is indeed the water level during the 1,500-year storm events, and for whichever bridge type we select, making sure that we're not having a detrimental effect upon those water levels during those storm events. So that's part of the task order, as well as that hydraulic analysis. The substructure design, which is the foundation of the bridge, if you will. If it's a precast, that foundation design is typically done through the precast companies. If it is a different type where it's maybe a pier and a concrete girder, then that would be done through our consultant. So that substructure usually includes the foundation itself, the arch, wing walls, things of that nature. Then the contract also includes the design of the superstructure, which is the street section itself, the sidewalk system, curbs, the rails for the keeping vehicles on the bridge, handrails, the approaches, on and off of the structure itself. That's the superstructure. So that's part of this as well. And then, that actual approach system design. So those are the things within this task order, this design services and construction administration project. It does not include anything on the corridor itself. We've been addressing the corridor as a separate but parallel process, as you've heard before. And so we're in the process still with Transportation Commission of assessing what are the options within the corridor. Depending on the type of things we ultimately end up with coming back to the council, it's very possible that we'll design those types of improvements with our own engineering staff. But if they're of other types, we may have to go out for a consultant for some of those other perhaps more complicated versions. Just depends on where we end up. So we're running those processes in parallel, as we've reported before, to council and the overall schedule. The idea here is for the bridge to get the design work underway, because it takes a little time to get through that design process and be in a position where we're able to go out to bid in the spring. So we're talking March, April, May timeframe to put this out on the street for bids for construction in 2018. The corridor concept work is also progressing along, and the intent there is to have a similar time frame in the spring for bidding whatever those improvements end up being, with design occurring, as I said, maybe by staff over the course of the winter once we figure out exactly what those are going to be. But the goal there would also be to take whatever corridor improvements we're going to construct in 18 and put those out to bid again in that probably April-May time frame. There is an art component to all our public works facilities, and so that's something we'll be looking at as well. As is there some component of art, public art, that should be included within the structure itself? It could be in the form of enhanced facilities on the structure and the handrail system and the approach to the rail systems, or something else. It could be something that we say that, hey, we're going to factor into the design the ability to add art into the structure at a later date. And there's a couple different ways to do that, but things that can be added into it as long as we design it up front that way. And then that would give us some time to go out through a public art process, and like we typically do with the arts department, if there's something we want to incorporate right into the structure. The other alternative, which does happen on some of our projects, if we don't believe there's a good way to actually incorporate the art into the structure itself, or the project itself, then the city does make payments from projects into the arts fund. The arts department then manages the creation of public art to go around town, but this would be an area that perhaps we could do something subsequently with the arts process to put art in the vicinity or in proximity to this structure. So there's a couple different ways, and we'll sort out how exactly that's going to happen as we move forward. But that is also part of the consideration. So the contracts before you with Keller is essentially a work order under our general services contract. It's task order number 4 under that contract. It is for the design services and construction management. Now, it's roughly half of each as far as the amount involved here. On the construction management side, what our goal is if as much as we can to have the engineering staff, public works staff, do as much of the construction management as we can. So where we can do an inspection, where we can do the paperwork on pay estimates and all those kind of things, we're going to do as much of that as possible in-house, which will then reduce the cost of this contract. This is a time and materials-based contract with a not-to-exceed limit. So basically we get billed for what we use, right? So that's an area with the construction management where the more we can do, the less consultant service we need, the less we're paying on the contract. But we wanted to set it up in a way that if for some reason we are not able to provide that service internally, then the consultant will do that. Part of what we're looking at is other projects that maybe can be through consultant services, different things, just in terms of the overall budget management that we need to do within the department. But that would be the cap. The amount here, $122,880, which is the task order budget limit under task order number 4. So before you would be a request to authorize moving forward with that design services task order.
Jim, this was heard or reviewed by Public Works and Finance Committee on November the 13th?
Correct. It was gone through kind of line item at that meeting, and while there are a few minor details in there that look kind of wonky, it seemed like the general ideas spot on for what we're trying to do here. And the things that jumped out were there will be a cost for a meeting that was $1,500 for this meeting and $1,535 for the next one. That seemed very similar, and couldn't figure out why. That seemed kind of arbitrary, but most of the numbers with large number of zeros on the end seemed to be reasonable. So I guess if no one has any further questions, I would move that we approve the task order agreement for design and construction management service with Keller and Associates in the amount not to exceed $122,880.
Second.
Okay, further discussion. Brandy.
Questions. Looking at the different tasks 1 through 6. And as you mentioned, they're kind of divided into 2 sections. So there's tasks 1 through 3 having to do with the evaluation and design components, and then the task 4 through 6 having to do with the actual construction oversight.